Greetings, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, and welcome to Star Trektember 2022. And this month, we're going to be taking a look at Season 3 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And, well, looks like I'm going to be doing 4 videos a day, so there you go. So let's kick things off with The Search, Part 1. Kira, Dax, O'Brien, Odo, and Bashir and Ops having a discussion about the possible invasion by the Jem'Hadar, the soldiers of the Dominion. Dax says the only 2 options are to abandon the station and make a stand on Bajor, or to collapse the wormhole. Just as Kira rejects both ideas and demands a third alternative, a subspace surge activates the security sensors. O'Brien is shocked that a cloaked vessel somehow approached the station's shield perimeter completely undetected. Suddenly, the ship decloaks and hails the station. On Ops' view screen, Commander Benjamin Sisko appears, standing on the bridge of an experimental vessel called the USS Defiant. It tells Kira that he has brought back a little surprise for the Dominion. Sisko and the senior officers discuss the Defiant in the station's wardroom. Sisko says it is a prototype, a warship originally designed to fight the Borg. With the Borg threat becoming less urgent over the years, the idea was abandoned after design flaws were found during initial testing. Sisko avoids the technical details, but sums up the situation. The Defiant is overpowered and overarmed for a ship of her size, and almost tore herself apart when tested at maximum impulse. When Kira complains of being sent this from Starfleet to fight the Dominion with, Sisko tells her that they are not going to fight the Dominion yet. Their mission is to go into the Gamma Quadrant, locate the Founders, whom are believed to be the Dominion's leaders, and convince them that the Federation is not a threat to them. The Defiant is to be used in order to show the Dominion that the Federation can and will defend themselves should there be an attack. At this point, Lieutenant Commander Michael Eddington and Sub-Commander Tarul enter, informing Sisko of the new security measures they have implemented. When Odo objects, Sisko introduces the Sub-Commander and says she is there to operate the cloaking device loaned to Starfleet by the Romulan government. She says her role is to keep unauthorized persons away from the cloaking device. When Sisko tries to introduce his officers to her, she interrupts, saying she's not here to make friends. She then leaves abruptly. Eddington then says he is here to make friends and introduces himself to Kira. Odo is more than a little put up by Eddington being from Starfleet Security and asks what exactly Eddington is doing here. Before he can reply, Sisko tells him there will be a full station briefing at 1800 hours and the Defiant will depart at 0700. He dismisses everyone. Odo comes to a conclusion. He informs Sisko that there is no need to brace himself to tell him unpleasant news, and that he already knows he has been replaced as head of security. Sisko runs to catch up, telling him in a corridor that he will still be head of all matters concerning non-Starfleet security. For Odo, this is not enough, and he asks why. Sisko says he even has to be chief of security. Sisko says he even has to be the chief of Starfleet security himself. He's even been to the chief of Starfleet Security herself, but the decision was final, due to concerns about recent security breaches on the station. Odo blames it on the restrictions caused by Starfleet regulations, and Sisko tells him that his reluctance to follow those regulations is a problem as well. Odo thinks it's due with his being the shapeshifter, and assures the commander that his resignation will be logged shortly. Inside the Sisko quarters, the commander finds Jake sitting at the dinner table eating an Idinian spice pudding, even though he is supposed to be unpacking. Sisko finds he now thinks of the station as home, and wonders aloud when he began to think of this Cardassian monstrosity as that. Jake suggests it was last week when the commander brought some of his items, including a 2,000-year-old Yoruba mask, to the station out of storage on Earth. The two have a comforting moment together as the elder Sisko looks for a place to hang the mask. Kira comes up to Odo as she looks out of a window on the promenade. She says that the provisional government has asked for his presence on the mission. Odo says he highly doubts that. He thinks it is just an attempt to make him feel better. Kira almost acknowledges that it is, and says that she is his friend, and is trying to make him see that he is still needed on the station. She leaves, after telling him that the Defiant leaves at 0700 hours. Odo continues to quietly look out the promenade's viewports. Quark is in Sisko's office, confused as to why he's just been asked to come on the trip to find the Founders. Cisco says it was because 8 months ago he helped Grand Nagasek establish trade links with the Karema, who are part of the Dominion. They may help to establish contact with the Founders. Quark tries to find excuses not to go, but Cisco will have none of it. Quark then flatly refuses, saying he has no intention of repeating his last experience with the Jem'Hadar, and he legally cannot be forced to go. In response, Cisco gets out the Grand Nagus' staff, saying the Nagus has already agreed to Quark's going on this mission, in the interest of keeping business opportunities open in the Delta Quadrant for the Ferengi Alliance. Quark is first accepted and is made to kiss the staff before leaving, to Cisco's amusement. Dax tells Cisco that O'Brien's checks indicate the ship will be ready at 0700. The two discuss the chances of succeeding. Cisco says the chances are slim, but better than the chance of surviving a Jem'Hadar attack on the station. Dax says she thought she'd never seen him so passionate about something since Jennifer died. Cisco says it was going back to Starfleet headquarters and being inspired by the admirals that made him passionate again. Dax says that Curzon never thought Cisco would be an admiral. He thought that Cisco would always have to be in the thick of things and not sitting behind a desk. Dax leaves after they both agree that they need to go get some sleep. On the Defiant the next morning, Bashir tells Cisco that the medical facilities are severely lacking. Dax enters, aware the commander that Quark has settled into his quarters, despite being disappointed by the decorations. All systems are online, and they are about to depart, when they are alerted to someone's presence in the airlock. It is Odo. He requests to come aboard, and Cisco agrees. Bashir volunteers to find him some quarters, as he has to go down to sick bay. The ship leaves, and cloaks once it enters the Gamma Quadrant. It begins to head for the Karema system. Odo has been forced to share a bunk with Quark, and says the only remaining quarters aboard with life support. Odo sits in a corner, as Quark begins to complain about almost everything there is to complain about. Odo says he has been holding his humanoid shape for 16 hours and needs to revert to his original form. Odo does not want Quark to watch. When Quark continues, he gets angry and tells him to stay out of his way. Odo then shifts into a liquid and goes into his bucket. Jem'Hadar fighters are detected in the vicinity. Cisco orders the ship to remain on course, as this would be a good time to check if the cloaking device is effective against Jem'Hadar sensors. The ship appears to have detected them as it turns around. The sub-commander disagrees, saying maybe subspace fluctuations that a cloaked ship emits at warp, and such dropping out of warp. Cisco gives the orders to do so. The ship scans the area with anti-protons, and is unknown whether they will detect the ship. The ships almost seem likely they have detected the Defiant, but they fly off into warp. On arriving on the Karema homeworld, Quark tries to persuade the First Minister Ornithar into putting them in contact with the Founders in exchange for trade advantages, and a 3% increase of Toliberi wine purchases. However, stating that their only contact with the Dominion leadership is through the Fortar race, who didn't instruct them how to deal with newcomers, Ornithar is reluctant to help them. He also points out he doesn't even know if the Founders are real, and that the Jem'Hadar will intervene at the smallest sign of insubordination. Quark then threatens to discontinue buying the wine altogether, prompting Cisco to point out that losing the point of trade agreement with the Alpha Quadrant might almost displease the Dominion. Compelled by Cisco's argument, Ornithar directs him to an unmanned subspace relay station in the Kalanon system, where the Karema send all communications for the Dominion. Interestingly, while looking at the star chart on the view screen, Odo recognizes a familiar form, the Omarian Nebula, and feels inexplicably drawn to it. Quark, with his job now done, chooses to remain with the Karema to continue trade negotiations to get a ride home, and Cisco agrees. When the Defiant arrives at Kalanon 7, the site of the subspace relay station, it engages the cloaking device and enters orbit. Dax and O'Brien beam down and manage to tap into the main computer suspiciously easy. However, before they upload the information to the Defiant, the two are interrupted as a hand grabs Dax's shoulder while an alarm is triggered, which activates a shield around the facility, trapping them inside. As Jem'Hadar warships approach the planet, Cisco is forced to flee and abandon the two of them on the surface with Tarul's approval and despite Bashir's objections. Bashir wonders what will happen to Dax and O'Brien. Cisco assumes they will be interrogated and hopes they will also try to contact the Founders. He moves on and calls Odo to the bridge to talk through security measures, but oddly, Odo refuses, saying he's busy. Carol leaves to talk with him when Tarul reports that 3 more Jem'Hadar vessels heading in their direction. Cisco decides to drop out of warp, cut off the main power, and wait until they pass just like last time. Kira finds Odo obsessed with the map on the computer in his quarters. She confronts him, but also wants to repay the friendship he's shown her when she needed him. Odo then reveals to her a strange obsession with the Omarian Nebula and begs her to let him go there in a shuttle. Kira's very confused by Odo's attitude and tells him that he considered taking once they finish their mission to find the Founders. Odo angrily and desperately tells her he needs to go there now. As Kira insists that the mission comes first, the ship comes under fire from 3 Jem'Hadar ships who have managed to penetrate the cloak. The Defiant decloaks and destroys one of the attacking vessels, but sustains heavy damage, and soon loses shields and main power, enabling Jem'Hadar soldiers to beam aboard. Kira's knocked unconscious, but Odo rescues her and escapes. After a brief fight, the bridge crew is overwhelmed. Kira wakes up in a shuttle with Odo, who informs her that the Defiant was captured by the Jem'Hadar. When she finds out the shuttlecraft is heading for the Omarian Nebula instead of back to DS9, Kira protests energetically, but Odo is unmoved. They finally arrive in the nebula and discover an M-class planet ahead, but no star system. They land the shuttlecraft on the surface and discover a strange mass of viscous liquid. As they are watching, several humanoid forms resembling Odo's appearance rise from the liquid. One of them, a female changeling, approaches Odo and greets him. "Welcome home." To be continued. Bum bum bum. So let's take a look at the production of this episode. The making of this episode involved changes to the makeup and costume used to portray Odo at the Quest for Winning Auberjonois. Having liked the way his mirror version of Odo had looked in crossover, he had lobbied the producers to keep this design. There were also some behind-the-scenes changes. For example, this was the first episode with Jonathan West as director of photography. Doug Drexler cited the Dominion Relay Station's episode as an example of a set whose look and feel were created using many brightly lit graphics, saying that the set was too dark to see any of the set otherwise. And now let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. This episode is a continuation of the events portrayed in the Jem'Hadar, and the first or two-parter, continuing with the Surge Part 2. This episode takes place 8 months after Rules of Acquisition and 2 months after the Jem'Hadar. Its first stardate was established in Sisko's log. Its second stardate was recalled by Odo in the Abandoned. The USS Defiant's weapons in this episode feature a heavy machine gun type of sound effect. All other episodes in the series involving the Defiant firing his weapons use a different sound effect, resembling a cross between a phaser and a cannon. The Defiant was built to fight the Borg, which it does for the only time during the Battle of Sector 001 in Star Trek First Contact. This episode features the first on-screen appearance of the Karema. They were first mentioned in the Season 2 episode Rules of Acquisition, but they were not seen at that time. This episode also establishes that Quark was obviously successful in opening trade negotiations with the Karema after being referred to them by the Dosi, and suggests that Gradnek and Sex planned to get in touch with a higher-ranking member of the Dominion by making demands which the Dosi couldn't fulfill was successful. Josiah Dax's new up hairstyle is unique to this episode and Part 2. Sisko's reaction on how bad the coffee is on the Defiant is similar to his disgust with the replicated coffee on DS9 in the first season episode Babel. This is the first episode in which Sisko expresses love for Bajor, and the first time he voices his refusal to allow it to fall under any circumstances. The theme of Sisko's love for the planet eventually became more and more important as time went by, and went on to be one of his primary motivating goals in the series finale, What You Leave Behind. Odo's reaction to Lieutenant Commander Eddington is almost identical to his reaction to Lieutenant Primin in the first season episode The Passenger. On both occasions, he tells Sisko that he will be handing in his resignation. Further, while talking to Sisko about Eddington, Odo references his frustration with having to adhere to Starfleet procedures being a key reason why he can't keep the station safe. His concerns were previously raised in the Maquis Part 1, following the explosion of a ship and 2 kidnappings. Odo says, quote, If you let me be in charge of security, I will give you a safe station. This episode sees the first appearance of the female changeling, played by Salome Jens, the Founders in the Founders' homeworld. And it's also the first appearance of Romulans in Deep Space Nine. This is also the first appearance of the Ward Room. The new style com badge that was used up to and including Star Trek Nemesis is first seen in this episode, after it was designed for Star Trek Generations. Odo's uniform remain like it is in this episode for the rest of the series. So overall, I really think this is a pretty good darn start to the season, and the introduction of the Defiant is absolutely incredible. So, yeah. So overall, I give The Search Part 1 5 warp cores out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in as we take a look at the next episode, The Search Part 2. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.